For this lesson, we are looking at eyewitness testimony again, but we are focusing on anxiety. And this is the last little bit explicitly on eyewitness testimony. We've got the cognitive interview left to do after this. But anxiety is our focus for today. So you will need, however you're making your notes, whether that be typed or written, and you will also need a little piece of paper as well to do our starter on. You've got an exam question that's already in your booklet, so you can write that in straight away to there. So let's get started. Our starter for today then is some quick questions on memory. Do it without your notes. I'll read each question out, give you 10 seconds or so to answer, and then I will go through all of the answers at the end of all 10 questions. So, number 1, what is the independent variable in Loftus and Palmer's first experiment? Number 2, how many stores are there in the multi-store model? Number 3, what are the names of the slave systems in the working memory model? Number 4, who conducted research on the coding of short-term memory and long-term memory? Number 5, which case study participant cannot remember things that are read to him? Number 6, who conducted a study using divers for theories of forgetting? Number 7, how many participants were used in Loftus and Palmer's second study? Number 8, who conducted research into post-event discussion? Number 9, what is the capacity of the short-term memory? And number 10, is there any research to suggest the duration of long-term memory is very long? So let's have a look at our answers then. Give yourself a mark out of 10. Any that you got wrong, you need to put a star next to it. Make sure that is your focus for revision. So the independent variable for Loftus and Palmer's first experiment is the critical verb in the question. Number 2, how many stores are there in the multi-store model? There's 3, century register, short-term, long-term. Number 3, what are the names of the slave systems? So you've got the central executive, the visuospatial sketchpad, the articulatory control centre, the episodic buffer. Number 4, it was Baddeley that conducted short-term memory research. Number 5, it's KF. Number 6 is Godden and Baddeley. 750 participants in Loftus and Palmer's second study. Number 8, it was Gabbett that did post-event discussion. Number 9, 7 plus or minus 2, or you could have had 5 to 9, that would be okay. Number 10, yes there is, it is by Barrick using the yearbooks in America. So they were just our quick recap questions. Make sure you are looking over all of memory because we are getting close to the time we're going to do a short mini test. So make sure you are revising. So for today's lesson, like I said, we're going to look at anxiety. We've already focused on misleading information. Anxiety is the second bit that we need to be looking at. So the definition for anxiety is a state of emotional and physical arousal, including having worried thoughts or feelings and physical changes such as heart rate increase. This can impact the accuracy of memory. That's your definition. Make sure you've got that written down. Let's have a look at some research then, and you'll notice in your booklet there is a lot of research, one that it has a positive, one that it has a negative effect. The one that is on about having a negative effect is by Johnson and Scott. Now I don't want you to write this out word for word. This is information upon the study. I'll go through it with you too, and then I want you to pause the video and I want you to write down the key points and as much as you feel that you need, but don't write it out word for word. So in this, it was a lab experiment. They were told that they were going to be there for an experiment, so participants were fully aware of what they were going to do in a separate room, but when they arrived, they were asked to go into a waiting room. Whilst they were in the waiting room, waiting for what they thought was going to be another experiment, they heard an argument in the background. So this was coming from another room. There were two conditions. One was a low anxiety condition, and there was an argument, and then a man walked through the waiting area carrying a pen with some grease on it. In the other one, a man walked out with a paper knife that was covered in blood, and there was a sound of breaking glass heard, and that was the high anxiety condition. So it was an independent groups design, lab experiment, two different conditions. What they found is when they were later asked to identify the man that left the room, out of a set of 50 photos, 49% of those who had seen the low anxiety condition were able to identify the person correctly, but only 33% in the high condition were. And Johnson and Scott thought that was because of tunnel theory, but we also need to remember that not all of these people remembered who it was in either of the conditions. So even when it was a low anxiety condition, only 49% actually remembered and could identify who it was, which shows that generally eyewitness testimony was not that good. However, it does have an increase upon the high anxiety condition, so this suggests that anxiety has a very negative effect and reduces accuracy of eyewitness testimony. So pause the video, write yourself some notes on this. Don't write it word for word. There is also contrasting evidence that says it's a positive effect, and this was done in Canada. Now, this was a real life occurrence. This was not set up. This actually happened. In Canada, it was a gun shop shooting. So the shop owner shot a thief dead. There were 21 witnesses and 13 of them agreed to take part in a study. So just less than half of them, just over half of them, sorry. After a couple of months, 4 to 5 months, they were asked about information upon the details of the shooting. So sort of like a similar interview again to see how accurate they were 4 to 5 months later. It was determined by the number of details reported in each account, and they were asked to rate how stressed they felt at the time of the incident. So using a 7-point scale, they asked if they had any emotional problems like disruption of sleep, anxiety since the incident. And what they actually found was after 5 months, there was very little change in the amount that they could remember. Some details were less accurate, such as the colour of items, the age of the person, but those participants who reported the highest level of stress were the most accurate, which implies that anxiety has a positive effect upon memory, especially over a long period of time. So again, I don't want you to write this word for word. I want you to pause it here. I want you to think about the key points about this study. So we have got a lot of mixed findings. We have got some that suggest that it is significantly impacting on, so it's a negative effect on memory if you are anxious. We also have some that says it makes it more accurate. You need to make sure you know the study for both of those so that you can argue both sides during an exam. Which one is actually true? There is also another little bit that sort of balances the two out. So this is the YerkesDodson Law, and it's in 1908, so it was created before any of the previous research that we have just written down was done. This isn't just for anxiety and eyewitness testimony. You can see on the graph that they have said arousal, which is anxiety and arousal for us, and performance is ours down the side. That for us would be the accuracy of eyewitness testimony. Now what you will see is that it's trying to balance out both that anxiety improves eyewitness testimony and it makes it worse by suggesting that there is an optimal level that is sort of in between. So what this says is if your anxiety or arousal is low, then your performance will be very weak, so inaccurate for us. As your attention increases, then so will your performance, and you get increased attention and interest with your higher level of arousal. That's until you get to the very top of the peak, and that is your optimal level of arousal and your optimal level for performance. So this is where anxiety and performance mean that our accuracy of eyewitness testimony will be much more accurate. But when your level of anxiety or arousal gets higher than this, your performance gets a lot lower. So if you are extremely anxious, your performance will be weak. But if you are not anxious at all, you will have the same level of performance. Again, that will be weak. If you are in the middle, not extremely anxious but have some anxiety, that will increase your level of performance to a certain extent. So make sure you've got a little bit of information around this written into your booklets. So you need to make sure you've got that there is a link between the emotional state and performance. Lower level of anxiety means low eyewitness testimony accuracy. Memory becomes more accurate as anxiety increases until a certain point, and that is when anxiety is the most accurate. However, there becomes a point when anxiety is too high. So a little bit of exam practice for you. It's 6 marks, so that gives you 9 minutes. So try and time yourself and see how you get on. So the question or the scenario that goes with it, Zena witnessed a violent incident. The attacker pulled out a knife and threatened the victim. Zena was close to the attacker and was very frightened and anxious. Her friend Amanda was further away and less anxious. The police took witness statements from both Zena and Amanda, and their statements were very different. So A, using your knowledge of research into the effects of eyewitness anxiety on eyewitness testimony, explain why Zena and Amanda's statements are very different. So for this one, you need to have a look at the fact that Zena was very close to the attacker and felt very frightened and very anxious. Amanda was further away and was less anxious. These are things that you need to make sure you have got in your answer. And then we have got B. A psychologist decided to interview both Zena and Amanda 5 months later to see if they could still remember the same level of detail about the incident. Explain one ethical issue the psychologist must consider before interviewing Zena and Amanda. It says one, so make sure you do only write one. It seems quite straightforward, but they will stop marking even if your second one is better. The first one is the only one that counts, so make sure you only write one. So time yourself, 9 minutes maximum, pause the video, have a look through. So let's have a look at our mark scheme then. For A, it doesn't matter which way round you said it. It doesn't matter whether you said Zena is more accurate than Amanda or whether you said Amanda is more accurate than Zena. You need to back that up. Now, Zena was the most anxious, so you could have used the evidence from the lab study or you could have used the evidence from the real life study to back it up. Essentially, it is 2 marks for each woman. So Zena will have a higher level of accuracy because anxiety increases eyewitness testimony according to, whereas Amanda had less anxiety, which would mean she wouldn't remember as much, or the other way around. It doesn't matter. And then B, protection from harm, as it could be a potentially stressful memory for them to recall it again due to the events that they have experienced. So just make sure you have said protection from harm for one and then explain why that might be an issue for the second mark. So try and give yourself a mark. I'll have a check over these when you send them to me. And then we've got some evaluations to do. So let's have a look. 2 strengths. Your P for 1 is that natural experiments were conducted, and that is for your E, the real and cultural one, the one that was done in Canada with the shooting. Why is it a positive that it's a natural experiment? Well, think about your different types of validity, but then how can you counter-argue that? What issues have we got with our level of control, and what could have impacted the results? And then your second one is there is also supporting evidence done in labs. Use the Johnson and Scott study. What does that allow us to see in terms of a relationship, but counter-argue that with the reducing the amount of ecological validity? Now, these are very, very basic outlines for you. By now, we should be quite good at doing our PECs and adding as much detail as we can. Remember, your P should be 1 sentence Your E should include details about the study, but you don't need to write everything about it. And then your C should probably be the longest bit, especially if you've got a counter argument, just to show that you have a higher level of understanding. So those are your two strengths. Weaknesses then. We have got one that states that weapon focus might not actually be relevant. So if you think about the Johnson and Scott study, it might not actually be testing the weapon focus, it might be a test of surprise. And that might be because the participants' focus on the weapon might be because they were surprised to see it, not because they were scared about it. And a study that backs that up is a study by Pickle in 1998. They conducted a study that was in a hairdressing salon, and that was where the video was taken. They had different conditions. The experiment was using scissors as a weapon, a handgun, a wallet, or a raw chicken. Yes, I know it's weird, but we'll see where it goes. So in the hairdressing salon, scissors would not be unusual. You expect to see scissors there. But if you saw someone holding a pair of scissors outside, that would be classed as a weapon. So actually what they found was that eyewitness testimony, the accuracy of it was a lot poorer in the high unusualness. So the chicken, they couldn't remember much because the focus was upon that chicken. That suggests, because there was a higher level of accuracy in the scissors condition and the wallet, it suggests that weapon focus is due to the unusualness or level of surprise rather than anxiety. So that means that it lacks face validity. Now, face validity, the extent to which something is testing what it says it's going to. So the study is saying that it's testing weapon focus and anxiety, but actually it might be studying the unusualness or level of surprise. So that is a weakness. Next one, you've got two options. You could just write these two if you'd rather not do the one about the raw chicken because it's a bit weird. But number one is it ethical to put people in these situations with high levels of anxiety, whether it is set up or not? Is it ethical for me to have someone walk out of a room with a paper knife? Would you know it was paper? It was covered in blood. Is that ethical for me to do? Or is it ethical for me to re-interview you after a traumatic event? Doesn't matter which E you use or which study you use for your E, as long as you use one of them. And then number two, is the inverted U too simplistic? Everyone experiences different emotions and thoughts under anxiety, and it isn't considered. It only considers the physical arousal levels. That makes it simplistic and therefore quite reductionist. So that doesn't consider each individual's reaction and how each individual performs under stress generally. So that is your other weakness. So you need two weaknesses, two strengths. I've given you three weaknesses. Pick whichever two you are the most comfortable writing about. And then lastly, your homework for over the weekend is to revise. Next week, I will hopefully be meeting all of you in our one-to-ones, but we'll also have to finish off one lesson of memory, and then you'll have a mini assessment without your notes. So make sure you are looking over everything from memory so we can see where we are up to. But have a good weekend. Happy revising.